So what I wanted to do is kind of show you what these words mean, because Heschel is really just defining all of it. And one of the first things I started with is bracha as the idea of Schleiermacher's sense of absolute dependence. I had an idea for what I wanted to tell you about that, which is, so bracha is a sense of gratitude, but I never told you what's this word absolute mean in terms of absolute dependence? And I think I can tell you. Remember, what we did was we talked about whether writing out a list of things that you're grateful for really really get at the heart of the matter. And the answer to that question is, well, it's like doing the prayers. You can do the prayers and maybe they elicit like gratitude, or they elicit the things you're reading about the return of our exiles to Zion. And maybe you're like, yes, I love Israel. So maybe it kindles something, or maybe you just do the prayers and you're like, okay, Israel, shalom, Rahmanas, these are nice things. So the answer to that question is, writing out a list of things you're grateful for is not the same thing as having a sense of real gratitude, of real sense of bracha, blessing, but it might remind you of moments of real gratitude that changed your life. So that Heschel's idea of emunah is very much about having faith, faithfulness to your moments of awe. So a gratitude list could reflect back on the times that you really had the feeling that generated real gratitude, but chances are making the list is not going to put you in a state of awe. Relative dependence, the gratitude of relative dependence is, isn't it great that I'm grateful because I used to be poor and now I'm not poor? Or I'm grateful because I didn't used to have a car, but now I have a car. So gratitude on Heschel's level is not about being relative to something else. It's absolute. And so the way he talks about it generates a concept that's very important for him. It is a relationship to I'm sorry, it's not darker, the thatness of things. So for example, gratitude is, I feel so grateful that I love Lynn more than I love someone else. It's great. It's gratitude. Absolute is your awe of the thatness of love at all. It's the Shechianu. It's your awe that life exists at all. Concept of thatness is key for many of his different things. So I'll stop there, but does that make any sense to people? I just thought it might actually help. The idea of the thatness that this thing exists at all, the thatness that it happened at all. It's hard to talk about some of these ideas without getting really serious, because your moments of awe don't happen all the time. You may only have a couple in your life, or you may have none. It is a sense that I didn't make these things. So like it is such a profound gift, because, and it goes to this idea of desserts. Like I feel like there's a lot of sense in which people give examples. My kid comes home from school and they say, my math teacher's bad. I have a bad math teacher. I don't like that, do you? Not great. Do you deserve to have, you have a right to get a better math teacher. You have a right to a great math teacher. Oh, what I say is, okay, how are you going to learn math? And so you're saying, what's the issue with dependence? Which is that I don't come into the world necessarily with a right. Do you have a right to love? Do you have a right to education? Now, society may say you have rights, but I'm talking about like religiously. I mean, you have a right not to be abused, but no, you don't have a right to decide how I speak to you. You don't have a right to decide that on your birthday, you don't have to go to work, right? You don't just like, there's a lot of sense of entitlement, and the idea of dependence is supposed to fight that. The idea of like, how lucky am I to be alive? How am I lucky to live in a world where I can be open and make happen for myself things. So the dependence is really just, I don't make these things, so that there is a sense of just profound gratitude. So here, let me try something a little different. What is my relationship to God? And one of the things that we've said is God is ineffable. My dependence on God for creating the universe, for allowing me to be alive, and all these kinds of things. This is God, this whole thing, and I'm in it. Think of it's like a human cell, and you have a mitochondria, and the mitochondria is asking, what's my relationship to the body? Does the body really exist? Does the body have a consciousness? And other people, I don't know, there's a nucleus over here or another organelle, and it says, I don't believe there's a body at all. I think it's just us. So the idea is that the mitochondria is inside the body and inside the consciousness. There's a consciousness to the body. So in other words, absolute dependence is I'm a part of God. I'm a part of a system. God's the universe. God's the system in which we are. It is the entire universe. And if you want, you could say something like it's the consciousness of the universe. And we never really, it's ineffable because the universe is never really something that's known by us in its essence. We have models of what the universe is, but you cannot picture the structure of the universe. I mean, physicists do their best, but it's always just a model. It's a model. So you never really get to, now we understand what the universe is. The universe is not something outside of you. You're part of the universe. Like a mitochondria is a part of a cell, which is part of an organ, which is part of tissue, or that's part of an organ, and that's part of a body. And then everyone wants to say, well, did God do this to you or for you? So the dependence is not, oh, thank God that God exists because God sent, I don't know, oxygen to my cell. It's rather that you're a part of God. Like you really see yourself not outside it, but you're dependent because you are part of the entire system. So that's where the dependence comes from. And then it's how lucky am I to be a part of it? Since for me, this course hinges a lot on, well, because Heschel's thought hinges on the idea of awe. And awe is a moment of seeing life under larger horizons. It's an emotional and cognitive experience that generates language and a change of view of how your life looks or how the world looks to you. So we did the duck rabbit. Like the idea is, I don't see the world as a duck. I now see it as the rabbit. And then Martha says, it looks the same to me. And you're like, well, I know it looks the same, but I see it differently. Right? Nothing shifted. There's not like the being came down with a finger and said, here's the 10 commandments, but it shifted my consciousness. So, okay. So I want to share with you.
As I got older and studied more, I began to think what I'm meant to help with is a shift in the way human beings perceive and think. And that is why I couldn't know what it was, because to explain to someone a fundamental shift in the way they think would have to be processed through the way they're thinking now. And so it would be fundamentally misunderstood. So now I'm old and I don't care what people think of me. So I just say this right out loud. It was a deep secret in my heart for decades. And now I just say, I think there is going to be a shift in human consciousness. And I think it's going to change the way humans relate to the planet, relate to each other, relate to themselves. And I could be wrong, but I don't care. I'm going to keep trying for it till the day I die. What is that shift?
Consciousness that you're predicting.
Wait, without thought. But actually, no, I actually have a theory now. My undergraduate degree was in East Asian studies. I lived in Asia and studied Chinese and Japanese. And they have a concept in Asia that is not well known in modern Western culture. And that is the concept of awakening. And it's awakening out of the dream of thought, which is I mean, the whole thing is now like half of our listeners are at this point probably thinking, Stephen has brought a lunatic to the program. I will not listen to this episode, but I'm promising you, it gets really cool if you focus on it. Because when you awaken, and it's a shift in the way, a fundamental perception, this is also very strong in India, Tibet, and the other Buddhist countries. It's a shift where you leave the aspects of your thinking that cause you internal suffering. You cease to suffer after you awaken. I think that's actually an epigenetic shift that is inherent in the brain of every individual, and that many individuals throughout history have gone through it. The great teachers, I think Nelson Mandela went through it in prison at Robben Island. So all over the world, in different cultures, in different parts of the world, throughout history, individuals have described this experience with a very, very consistent terminology. You awaken, you realize that the life you've been living is real, but only in the way a dream is real. And that the reality of the awakened state is much more real. And in that state, there's no fear.
Yeah, you're not screen sharing it. We're just thinking.
So there's the desire.
Cut it off.
There is love for all beings, not just every human, but every being there is. And there's a kind of fundamental peace and bliss, the bliss of being, they call it in Sanskrit, Satchitananda. The bliss of being becomes your everyday state. I think if a critical number of people experience that at the same time, we could just fix the problems humans have been causing for the last few thousand years.
How could you persuade anybody that that state of being is even possible?
Well, I have a few tricks. There's no persuading. I could show you a few things if you want that I tend to do when I'm coaching people.
So let's get on to that then. Who are you in terms of your qualifications?
I am a person who has experienced intense psychological and physical suffering for decades. Absolute wreck of a human being. Physically, by the time I was 30, I had been bedridden for 10 years with autoimmune diseases. I had depression and anxiety in massive amounts from the time I was very small. And then I actually had an experience during a surgery, which was like a near-death experience, where I felt like I saw this light and I felt connected to it, more than connected to it. I felt radically shifted. And I came out of that surgery and changed. I stopped telling a single lie with any aspect of my speech, behavior. I would not lie after that. So in the next year, that was a very exciting year, I walked away from my family religion, which was very, very important in my home community. So that meant I lost my family of origin, my community of origin, every friend I'd had before the age of 17 when I left for college. I realized I was gay, so I left. That was the end of my marriage. I had to leave my home. I left academia, basically threw everything into the bonfire. And I would not recommend this to anyone listening out there. Don't do. I did this so you would not have to. I can tell you there are easier ways. But through it all, through everything I've studied with my mind and through everything I've experienced with my body and my heart, I'm not saying I awakened, but I feel I know what awakening is. And for that reason, I feel very safe in the world and very joyful. All I can say is, this is in you. I may be able to help you find it, but I don't need to create it.
I apologize to everyone on Zoom that I couldn't figure out how to share it. I hope you could hear it because it was really just an interview. So I know. So a couple of things that she says, and She's pretty famous. I'll give you the information later. So one thing she said was, I'm not here to persuade. I mean, she wants to persuade you, right? She wants to proselytize, but she's like, it's not something I can persuade you of, which was really last session with Heschel. It's not intellectual. I can't persuade you of God's existence. I can't persuade you that this is all the way, this is what these things mean, and they go that way. But she's desperate to try to get you to see the world differently. So she's like, look, I was miserable, I was traumatized, I was depressed, and something shifted me. What shifted her? She studied Eastern philosophy, so she had the ideas, but it doesn't, just because I've studied Eastern philosophy, maybe you have too, right? I mean, like, it was, I knew there was something in it, but I also wasn't it. And then when white people tried to tell me what Buddhism was, and then you go to a Buddhist country and you realize they don't think it's that. So, like, there's a lot of misunderstanding and about what the other is thinking. But there's something going on in these ideas. And then she says she has a near-death experience. So the near-death experience, she sees the light. She has an experience of awe. She has experience of connection. And she says, like, all I can tell you is that it gave me a command. And the command it gave me is you will no longer lie ever again in speech or action. So she can't lie about her sexuality, she can't lie about her marriage, but she will not lie again, which is a very holy thing. And so she has yira that leads to mitzvah. And one of the things she says, it's over 2-hour interview, is how much it also led her to see her life, although she had a seed of it when she was 4, in terms of service. You realize, you start to realize that there's no real, given the gift of life, the way you are intended to use it is to serve. How can I be of service in my time on earth? And that's also a common theme you see in religious thinkers and in Judaism. You have the whole issue of the Levites and the Kohanes. What does it mean to serve a community? You have a whole tribe that does it. Later, the idea of what does it mean to serve God and to be a servant of the Jewish community, or both. So this is not a language that's reserved for Heschel. And I have other videos too of people talking about these things. And so the idea that religion is based on experiences, that not everybody has those experiences, and then your faith is a faithfulness to those moments. If they gave you a command, then you obey the command. You do not have to obey the command. You can dismiss your experiences. Like that, like in the moment that it's happening, I must have been on some kind of drugs and anesthesia, and I just thought this was happening. You might wonder, what does Judaism think of near-death experiences? Well, in the Talmud, there's a statement that's, we have no idea what the afterlife looks like. What does it mean to rejoin God? Like that, if you can't imagine God, like you can't give a picture of God, God's not a thing, then returning to God and into God, then you can't picture it. So the Talmud says, don't believe anyone who tells you about the afterlife because they're probably a charlatan. And that's a very Jewish concept. We believe in it, but we don't know what it is, because that would be the same thing as picturing God. But there is a story that says that one of the rabbis, had a near-death experience, and he was greeted by a relative who invited him to ascend, right? To join him, to ascend, to join him in returning to going to the afterlife. And that's a very common thing you see. And this idea that you rise above, we also have it in Judaism. So the idea that a near-death experience might actually be real. So you could say, I was on drugs and anesthesia and whatever, and I dismiss it. Or you can say, I'm going to be faithful to what it communicated to me about what I should do with the rest of my life, or how I should behave. So I wanted to give you, I also have another example. If we get to it, I can show you on the video. And this one might be able to film easier because I have it on DVD.
I think I would say that philosophy doesn't have the answer, nor does psychology, nor does any of our esteemed psychoanalytic colleagues. That she's talking about, and I think Heschel's talking about recognizing that what we've got to work with isn't sufficient as human beings to explain life, what it is to be human, our relationship to things that are unknowable, that we're living in this absence of answers. And we like to think we have answers. I think psychoanalysis can be very helpful in providing ways of understanding some things, not everything.
He said it, we've already looked at it in the past 2 sessions. Is giving a genetic account of something, a causal account, does it explain it? To what extent is giving a causal account an explanation? So she had a sense that she should serve humanity when she was 4. And then she had a thought later that I now will serve humanity with this. Okay, you have, is her sense of serving humanity explained exhaustively by the fact that she had an intent to do that prior to that? She moved on from there. She basically is saying that for someone who had anxiety and depression, she realized there's kind of like with the duck rabbit, there's a different way of viewing life under different horizons with a different paradigm. And it's not an intellectual paradigm. Like sometimes when I teach, I'll say, you can have the Darwinistic paradigm, or I'm offering you a symbiotic paradigm, which I think is more true to contemporary evolutionary theory. So if you took a course that I did years ago, I did a whole thing on that. The Darwinistic paradigm is outmoded. There's a new paradigm that started in the aughts, and it changes the way you see, it can change the way you see reality. But that was strictly intellectual. That was like an intellectual kind of thing. And she's saying, no, I had a different way of seeing the world. I'd love to give you an example from my life, but it's not as profound as hers. Because I'm really focusing on the experiences which may have precedents in one's consciousness that change the way people view the world. And that Heschel's saying, I think those experiences are what we mean by religion. Those are the experiences that generate religion. And many people will live religion without having those experiences, but that's where religion comes from. And he calls them prophetic experiences. You may have an experience of awe, or you may not. And so I'll give you a quick experience of mine, although I don't mean to be like self-aggrandizing, right? So I was in academia, and I was at a seminar. I may have told the story before. I was at a high-level invite-only seminar for visiting scholars. Only like 15, 12 people were invited. The guy flew across the world. We're sitting in one of those fancy department rooms, looks like the Michigan Union or something like that. And we're waiting for it to start. So we're there, we're waiting 5 minutes. No one's talking, it's awkward. So I felt weird. I felt like we should feel collegial and start something up. So I started up, I said, last night I was teaching Hebrew High, I was teaching Martin Buber, I taught this thing, kids loved it, 2 of them now want to write their college essays on it. So, modern Jewish thought, like, it's cool. Like, people are into it, like, it has an effect. And the only undergraduate who had been invited, very ambitious young undergraduate, said in front of everyone, right before we started, that must have felt really good because of your ego. Because high school students don't know anything. So I bet you just felt like a king teaching them Jewish philosophy. The real test of whether you know any Jewish philosophy is whether you can say it at this table and in this room to your colleagues who have read all this stuff. And I went home and I couldn't sleep well, I did sleep eventually. I don't want to exaggerate, but something like 3, 4 in the morning. I stayed up all wondering whether my teaching in Jewish congregations, I'd won the first annual Diller Award, $10,000 for best Jewish studies teacher in Northern California. Now that award is spread. I was teaching at congregations and Hebrew High. It was all an ego trip. Stayed up all night. And then I just had like in the middle of the night, this just like overwhelming sense that that's a lie. And that teaching these kids who are trying to they're saying, this changes my life. This changes the way I want to live. Who's changing anything in a room of Jewish studies scholars? Who has ever changed their mind? I quit. I was like, I want to serve the Jewish people. They're like serving. So it was like a service and ego trip, right? The priest goes out, I'm closer to God, I'm the rabbi, I know more than you do, blah, blah, blah. In this congregation, I probably know less than you do. So, and I was certainly prepped for that experiences. I have two parents who didn't quite finish their PhDs and ended up serving the Jewish community. So I certainly had precedents in shaping of my consciousness. But I don't think that experience, which was really like emotional and bodily, so it definitely had precursors and it was part of a chain, but it shifted the way I view the world, and I still view the world that way. I mean, I still hope that at my funeral, just someone says, the only thing we need to say about Nadav is he devoted his life to serving the Jewish people. Like, that's all I want you to say about me. Like, I think that's, I just want to be honored for that, and it's not an easy life, but there are worse lives. I feel very grateful I get to do it. And I have other stories like that too, but so it does have precedence. And okay, so you have an experience, and if you're true to it, then you're true to it. I don't know. I had an experience of blah, 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 and I became vegetarian. Okay, so mazel tov, you're vegetarian. What's that have to do with religion? What's that have to do with Judaism on some level? And what's that do with something larger? For one thing, I would say that he was like, this is important, that religion is based in experience, like relationships can be based in love, and that they can change, that understanding the purposes of your life and its orientation is a big goal of religion. Seeing the duck as a rabbit instead of as a duck is a really, really, really big deal. And it will change the way you behave. She's like, I became less anxious. I mean, it's important whether you have, that you live up to your moments of awe. I'll tell you a piece of awe I did not have. Everyone told me when your first child is born, they're going to hand you the child Nadav, and you're going to be like a moment of awe, being like, oh my God, I am responsible for another human being. I will never let God down. I didn't have that moment. So I'm just telling you, like, I'm not such a saint. Like, I was like, I got to cut the cord. That's a little bit weird. I got to do this. I got to help my wife. I don't know. Like, so like I'm saying, but Heschel's like those moments are really powerful. That's something where you just really take hold of. I feel like this is my purpose, or I feel like I've been given a responsibility, and I want to really do that. Jeff.
The implication is that if we practice the dogma, we recover the experience. That's clearly a falsity. But I think what Heschel is saying is that we all hunger for experience, whatever that means. And our frustration is that Heschel does not give us a roadmap. You're saying it's how you perceive things, how you force yourself to take a different vantage point, look at things not the same old way, but try a different, from over here, from up there, from down below. Something, but there is, the point I think you keep making is there is no roadmap.
I really agree with you, Jim, but I just want to say, like, there's some signposts. So for example, some signposts are, he would say these words. He would say, these are the words of the prayer book, and we'll do prayer. These words contain seeds for if and when you're ever ready to understand them. If you're, so for example, like, I mean, there's signposts, and a kid tells me no. And Heschel's answer, by the way, about synagogue. In all likelihood, you will not have a moment of awe in the synagogue. You might. I've known people who've had very powerful experiences near the Torah, and I consider them real. But what's the roadmap? The roadmap is you are going to synagogue to remember either your experiences of awe or at least the faithfulness that you're supposed to be doing. Right? So that, in other words, like, so at least there's a territory to inhabit. It's not a roadmap. You're exactly, there's no map to the territory, but there's a territory. And the big answer, and I know people, and Steve's being patient, the big answer, and I'll get to it right now, but after Steve, is just this, which is that Heschel is admitting a lot of people are not going to get this, and a lot of good Jews. That's why I did last time, the whole topic was ethics versus holiness. They're very, very, very different, and they're not the same. And holiness is rooted in awe, and ethics, it doesn't have to be. You can come up with all kinds of ethical theories and ethical systems that are not rooted in awe and be a very good match. But his attitude is that prophecy places messages from God through awe and mitzvah into the community. And to be a Jew is to be basically, the religion is built out of prophecy. So it doesn't have to be your self-experience. It could be others. And that's perfectly fine. And so it is very communal. I think he would say, a lot of people don't know what I'm talking about. That's okay. But he also he wants someone like, I mean, like why I spent last time talking about like middle school kids, and I am always doing. How do you teach a religion that is really based on very deep kind of experiences of God to people who don't know what you're talking about? And his attitude is, don't leave out the fact that it's based on experiences of God. And I was reading him in preparation for today's class. I mean, he quoted Maimonides and he slammed him. He quoted Spinoza and Heschel slammed him. He's like, you have all these great theories and theologies, and no, it's not that. Sorry, all these brilliant people. If that's what you want, you can go for that. But I will never teach a course like Neil Gilman's Sacred Fragments. The way Jewish theology has been taught in so much time is, here's a book. There are 15 essays. There's Spinoza, there's Levinas, there's Buber, there's Heschel, there's Rosenzweig, there's Falkenheim. And you go through all the people I studied and you're like, well, do 1 week, and whichever one you like, good for you. I'm glad, I'm glad I helped. I don't think it's helpful at all. I'd rather have someone like Heschel saying, they all missed the point, and this is really what it is, and this is what generated the religion. I mean, like at least he's not playing intellectual games. He's not trying to prove the existence of God.
Prophecy consists in the inspired communication of divine attitudes to the prophetic consciousness. The divine pathos is the ground tone of all these attitudes. A central category of the prophetic understanding for God, it is echoed in almost every prophetic statement. God is moved and affected by what happens in the world and reacts accordingly. Events and human actions arouse in him joy or sorrow, pleasure or wrath. And this is supposed to be prophecy, do you think?
Yeah.
Okay. Prophecy denotes not an idol. Oh, pathos?
Oh, thank you. Sorry.
Okay, pathos, got it. Okay, thank you. That denotes not an idea of goodness, but a living care. Not an immutable example, but an ongoing challenge, a compassionate summons.
Okay.
From the prophet.
So I know this is very challenging. I'm going to draw that picture again. Let's just say somehow God, this is the way today we use the phrase, the universe. Because the universe spoke to me. That's pretty human. The universe sent a message. I feel connected to the universe. If you say, well, what exactly is the universe? People are like, oh, come on, it's kind of ineffable. I mean, I'm a universe. It's not like a giant video camera or a giant plant or a giant person. That's why it's not God. So like I tell you, it happens to me at least once a month. Someone comes in my office. They talk to me about how they're an atheist, but they have a great connection to the universe, and the universe has spoken to them. And they had an experience of the universe when they did drugs in college, and it changed their entire view. And I probably think they're terrible for that. And I'm like, yeah, we do everything but use the word God. Right. But and I was like, well, what's the universe like? Well, the universe behaves very strangely. I'm like, oh, God behaves very strangely. I felt like a part of something greater than myself. Oh, that has nothing to do with God. I felt like it gave me a purpose and a mission. Yeah, God's not supposed to be doing that. You know, it led me to think that I should get over my ego and how I'm so as one person told me, and I loved them for it. They said, I saw the universe, I saw things in the dimension of the infinite. I'm like, oh, that's only about a third of all Kabbalistic texts, but it has nothing to do with Judaism. It has nothing to do with God. It's just my experience. So I'm telling you that Heschel's trying to get all those people, and remember, he was writing in the 60s. He died in 72. Like people like Shlomo Karlebach and Zalman Schachter, you have all these Jews who are having experiences, they're changing the way they want to serve, they're opposing Vietnam, that are connecting to the earth, that are changing and they're like, oh, but it has nothing to do with Judaism. It has nothing to do with God. So I would say that the way we use the word universe, the way he uses God. So you're a part of it. And it is part, and it is in you. Like it's also, there's no distinction in most Jewish theology, especially Kabbalah, between inner and outer. God is as much in you. It's a false distinction. When you're doing Yedid Nefesh on Friday night, Yedid Nefesh, you're calling your soul God. Like God's in you. It's not like, well, God's out there. What's my relationship with God? Well, let's turn it around. If I was a Rebbe, I'd be like, what's your relationship with your soul? Well, I don't believe in the soul. Yeah, I mean, I put under a microscope, there's no soul. Okay, but then you say, so I say to someone, what's it like to treat someone as a soul instead of just a patient? I can tell you that. I can tell you that because I had experience as an ER doc, and it changed my whole life. I'm treating souls. I'm not treating patients. I'm like, oh, but there's no God, and there's no none of that has to do with Judaism or your religion. No. Judaism is about what God. The Torah was dictated on Mount Sinai, and we all know that that was made up later. So I need to say that because what he says here is that the idea is that the universe can feel. And the universe can care because the universe is not stars and molecules outside of you and galaxies expanding into infinity. The universe is biology, and the universe is life, and the universe is in this part of this room. So the universe has a relationship with, especially with life. And so the universe can care, and the universe can feel. One way to talk about this is that, do you know this is a terrible mark. Do you know the,
Jerry found some of it.
I'll just write bigger.
That'll help.
So do you know the word for face in Hebrew, panim? So why is panim a plural? Which is that sometimes it's translated countenance. The idea is, and you could say I'm wrong, I'm getting to the end of it. One of the things that we're evolutionarily bred for is recognizing faces, right? It's a big part of what we do. The fact that I can tell apart tons and tons of people is an amazing thing. And babies do it very, very quickly, so you see it genetically unfolding. Reading expressions. What you're basically doing is taking different parts and you're reading them as a whole. And what Heschel is saying is, think of the universe as a face, because since Elohim, one of our words for God, is a plural form, but it takes a singular verb. That think of the universe as it's made up of parts, but it has a countenance. It feels. Human beings hurting each other, there's a feeling to it, and it cares about us. It wants us, it's calling us to certain kinds of behaviors and feelings. It doesn't want me to be anxious and suicidal and traumatized. It doesn't want me to be selfish and short-sighted and short-tempered. Like I'm out of step with it. So the prophet is someone who experiences the pathos of God, which is they feel what the universe is feeling and they put it into words. And you don't want to be a prophet because it's no fun to feel what the universe is feeling and put it into words, especially after all of this time, right? So I know people are like, I don't see how you can give a course on Heschel not mentioned, so I wanted to mention that. The Navi in Judaism is an intermediary. They are the marriage counselor. They are an intercessor. They are not a mouthpiece. They are not a diviner. They are not an ecstatic prophet. It's like I speak in tongues and it's God speaking through me. I'm feeling what God is feeling, and I got to tell you guys that. But then it's like you guys are like, hey, but we're blah, 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 blah. And you're like, okay, now I got to tell God like Moses did. They're kind of frustrated that I was up on the mountain for 40 days and they didn't know what to do. So, like that they have a personality. They speak in their own language. Their metaphors come out of their own experience. They are not a mouthpiece for a passive message. So the psychology of the prophet is important. How they grew up. Ezekiel is a priest, and he's talking in the language of the priesthood. And you could say, one person might say, well, God spoke to him in that language because he knew he was a priest. Heschel's the hell with that. Ezekiel's feeling like we're in exile. And Jeremiah and I begged the king to ally with Babylonia and not to ally with Egypt, because clearly Babylonia was going to win the war and we are probably going to get destroyed. And all he did was put Jeremiah in jail and we were destroyed. And like, ugh, if there's a God, how can this happen? And Ezekiel is like, I'm going to preach from it is coming from my own psychology. So he has this idea of pathos. You feel what the universe is feeling, and you put it into your own words. You do not, it's not God's words, it is your words. The way you do it comes from your own background, your own personality. And so then he says here, in view of the insistence by the prophets of Israel upon the divine origin of their utterances, one inclines to agree with the ancient conception of the prophet as a mere mouthpiece of God. But a careful analysis, however, compels us to reject the characterization of prophetic inspiration as a mere act of passive and unconscious receptivity. What indeed was the nature of the prophet's transmission of what he perceived? Was it an impersonal reproduction of an inspired message, a copy of the contents of inspiration, or did the prophetic experience involve participation of the person in the act of transmission or even the inspiration itself? Is prophecy to be thought of as a technical activity like divination? No. Is the prophet a person whose consciousness, in consequence of divine influence, utterly dissolves in surrender to the divine word? No. The conception of the prophets as nothing but mouthpieces, the assumption their hearts remain unaffected, would almost compel us to apply to them the words that Jeremiah used of the people. You, God, are near in their mouth, but far from their heart. The prophet's not a mouthpiece, but a person, not an instrument, but a partner. I'll keep going. Prophetic consciousness is marked by a shuddering sense of the unapproachable holiness of God. The prophet notes there's a chasm that cannot be bridged, a distance that won't be conquered. The central feature of the understanding of God in the Hebrew Bible is divine superiority to nature. And to the prophets, God was overwhelmingly real and shatteringly present. They never spoke of God as from a distance. They lived as witnesses, struck by the words, rather than explorers engaged in effort to ascertain the nature of God. They did not simply absorb the content of inspiration, they also claimed to understand its meaning and sought to bring such meaning into coherence with all other knowledge they possessed. Together with receptivity to the word of God, they were endowed with the receptivity of the presence of God. The presence and anxiety of God spoke to them out of manifestations of history. I said Heschel's a great proponent of conservative Judaism. To me, when I study Reform Judaism, whether anything like the Exodus or Sinai happened, it doesn't matter. It's a myth. It's a story. It is a part of it's the treasure of our ancient literature that provides symbols and values for us to apply to our contemporary lives. If anything ever happened, doesn't matter. It's literature. Orthodox tend these days, more than ever before, to say that Moses was dictated to on Mount Sinai. And he wrote it down. In fact, Moses wrote the whole Torah on Mount Sinai. And in fact, all of what we get in the Mishnah and probably the Talmud was spoken to Moses, and he didn't write it down, but he passed on those teachings secretly and orally. So when they had debates in the academy, Hillel knew what to say and Shammai knew what to say. It's called oral Torah. It was all spoken on Mount Sinai. So Heschel is the conservative one in the middle, which is the history matters a lot, but it doesn't have to be exact. And the reason being is he's saying that if you notice in the holiness code, every time an animal's life is holy, blood is holy, the dead body is holy, the stranger is holy, a human life is holy, almost every time then it says, I'm the God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. So Heschel's attitude is that prophecy for our people in the period of the Exodus happened. And if it really didn't happen, then you're probably not a conservative Jew. But the idea that it happened exactly the way it looks with exact dictation and you take the Bible literally is real, the connection between events and mystery. It's to reduce the mystery of prophecy to the ordinary. And this has something in common with Catholicism, which is that what I find that the Orthodox do today, which Heschel's critical of, is when you reduce the mystery of what happened in the Exodus and the prophetic messages that came through that created the basis of our halakha and our people. It's like, how the hell did that happen? Like, what makes it beautiful and religious and prophetic is that nowhere on the earth are they saying this. Kings rule by divine right. Slaves are slaves, born a slave, born to be a slave, go into debt. You deserve to be a slave. Kings get to make laws, et cetera, et cetera. Runaway slaves are extradited. And then you have this people that come out of Egypt and they form these ideas. There shouldn't be a king. I know we got one later, but it's disapproved of. So no king, all kings are tyrants. There's only one lawmaker in the universe, and that's God. Human beings don't make laws. They're trying to conform to the divine law, to the law that the prophets are saying, we need to do this. You can't rape a woman that you captured in war. We're coming up on that chapter. And if you do, then you have to either marry her or grant her her freedom and give her something to go away with. We are today conditioned to conceive the origin of things in terms of their development and lack the ability to grasp suddenness, pure events, and creativeness. The Bible asserts that man has given himself neither his existence nor his wisdom, both are derived from the will of God. It teaches us that certain insights come to us not by the slow process of evolution, but by sudden grant. A cosmic fear enveloped all those who stood at Sinai, a moment more staggering than the heart could feel. The thunder and lightning in Sinai may have been merely an impression, but to have been suddenly endowed with the power of seeing the world in a new way, with an overwhelming awe of God, was a new sort of perception introduced into this world, a new way of seeing the world, a new way of seeing people. At that moment, the people of Israel not only were able to entertain a feeling, because it's not just a feeling, it goes into mitzvah. That's why we have the Ten Commandments and so on. To share in the all that overtook the world. Only in moments when we're able to share in the spirit of all that fills the world are we able to understand what happened to Israel at Sinai. Revelation is not an act of interfering with the normal course of natural processes, but the act of instilling a new creative moment into the course of history. Let's go skip one. To assume that prophetic revelation was the expression of an urge hidden in the heart of the prophet, of which he not only was unaware, but which he resisted, would presuppose the action of a spiritual power so wise and so holy that there would be no other name for it but God. To claim that religious thoughts arise from the subconscious would merely substitute a mystery for a mystery. And this may offend our psychotherapist, or it may resonate with our psychotherapist. The subconscious is a hypothesis so wide and so vague that it is hardly more positively known to us than the idea of the supernatural. There is no perception that may not be suspected of being a delusion, but there are perceptions which are so staggering as to render meaningless the raising of such a suspicion. So I think it is absolutely true, because I spent so long taking psychology courses in college, and they're explaining the way the mind works, and I'm like, show me the data. Well, when I say this to the patient, this happens. So where are these mechanisms in the mind? You're explaining, well, where is the subconscious? So there's the subconscious, and then the thoughts come into the conscious. But what he's saying is this, Murph. He's saying, let's just put it right out there, because we're at the end. What if Moses was schizophrenic? Okay, so let's just make it easy. We don't have to deal with the subconscious as well. We know what the subconscious is, so like it explains it better than a change in perception. If someone was schizophrenic and someone came out of Egypt and was shaped by that experience and had this stuff going on, and they're with their people and they're like, you know what? God spoke to me and God said, no people should have a king on this earth. And there are not national gods fighting these wars. There's only the one God of the universe, and it's the God of everybody. And the stranger should be treated differently than everybody treats them. And the slave should be treated differently than everybody treats them. And our whole society should be based around this and that. He would say, because he does, he was like, okay, so it's a new way of seeing. It's a prophetic speech that's come into the world. And that's really powerful. And it changed the world. Poor person, the rich person have the same rights in court, which wasn't really a thing for thousands of years after that. So he would say that the meaning of that change of way of seeing the world, what's the point of, I mean, he's saying you're missing, sometimes the universe operates in a way that there's a direct sudden grant to how to live and how to change. And to say, well, you know, it was in their mind. Okay. Well, I mean, like, I mean, so that's his thing, which is that you can train yourself to say, I'm going to causally explain everything that happened. And he would just say, you're missing the point, which is something new was introduced into the world that changed the world for the better. And you don't have to say the person didn't think about it until it happened, because no, the person's part of it. Their psychology is part of it, their language is part of it. But we are part of a people that have a common history, that had prophetic messages that are rooted in that history and what it means to be a Jew, whether you have moments of awe or religious experience or not, is to be true to that history. And halakha is not the enemy, that it generated a pattern for living. So you may not want to keep Shabbat, or you may not believe that came from anywhere, but he's saying that originated in the idea that you have, that not only can no one enslave you, but you're not allowed to enslave yourself. It is rooted in the insight that their only real sense of true gratitude comes from if you give yourself a moment of not wanting to alter the world. So that for one day a week, you do not introduce a new creation in the world, because then you don't understand just the fact that to be truly grateful is to say the way things are now are beautiful, instead of like, but it would be nice if I didn't have acid reflux. Like that's not absolute gratitude, right? So that the sense of the holiness of animals and things like that. I mean, for me, meat and milk not going together, doesn't matter if it's milk from one animal. It is, as Maimonides says, and Heschel would agree, it is rooted in a prophetic experience of motherhood. That the one thing that mammals and we share is love for our young. Dad's not so much included, but mom's, yes, according to Maimonides. Like a mother suckling its young, a bird covering the eggs in a nest, according to the Torah. There is like, they have real feelings. And so you don't live off what was intended for the offspring at the same time as you're eating the flesh of the animal, so that it generates a pattern for living. And then other people may not care about any of this, but they're part of the Jewish people but his attitude is that because they're living out a pattern for living structured out of prophetic experiences. And that if it was a lousy construction, we probably wouldn't be around today. Like, I mean, he's using a pragmatic test. It's like, it's pretty great, isn't it? I mean, we've been around 3,200 years. Like, there's something pretty cool about this tradition. So, I mean, you know, probably if it wasn't so great, it probably wouldn't be here anymore. I mean, the Romans aren't here anymore. You know, the Spanish Empire isn't here anymore. I mean, so like, these insights probably are pretty awesome. So you're basically operating off of these experiences. So this is from Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil. We must acknowledge the small terse fact that a thought comes when it wishes and not when I wish, so that it is a falsification of the facts to say that the subject I is the condition of the predicate think. We might as well just say it thinks, but that this it is precisely so. But then if you say, oh, that it's the ego, you mean the ego thinks. That's only a supposition, assertion, not an immediate certainty, like Descartes said, or Kant. After all, one has even gone too far with this it thinks. Even the it contains an interpretation of the process and does not belong to the process. So in other words, he agrees with the concept of inspiration. I mean, if you really want to use a simple word, he's like the prophets are inspired. And then you could say, well, you're inspired because this happened to you prior to that, or you took a drug, or you were a slave, or you were impressed by an experience in your childhood. But Heschel would be like, sure, all of that's in your subconscious. He's not, but he's like, but the fact that to accept that moments of change perception happen, and his attitude is you are really in touch with the universe that you are a part of. And that is as legitimate an explanation that you, as you are a little causal circle, a little billiard ball being bounced by other billiard balls, and so you had no choice, or that you are the master of your own thinking. Well, that was my thought. I had an inspiration, and that was me. His attitude is, well, sometimes, as Einstein said, my best ideas come to me in the bath, the bus, and the bed. And, so you can say, well, they emerge from the subconscious. National's like, you can call it the subconscious or you call it something else, but sometimes when you're like, there's something about like, I'm living inside a body, like, and this body is the universe. And then this thought comes to me, I am part of a whole that is part of a larger chain of causal chains. At one point, I think I gave you the quote, is like, look, people want to say, well, it has one cause, but how about if you're part of hundreds of causes having simultaneously? That's what it means to say, thank God that the universe led to this thought coming into my mind that is a gift of a sudden grant from God.